Hello, my name is Olurotimi. Today is April the 12th, 2026. It's a Sunday. I went to church today. I enjoy going to church on Sundays. Um, because it's Sunday, I had actually promised that I will make sure that I will do a video discussing the Bible, gleaning some kind of insight from the Bible. Now, a reason I actually started doing these videos was for my friend's son, one of my friends, and she'd asked me, before my incident, right, my false flag operation, which I was a victim of a false flag operation on May 16, 2023. It's been going on, and so I was filed during the false charges filed against me, but it was a result of a false flag operation, right? So I was framed by Montgomery County Police. I've done a video on false flag operation defining what that is. So in order to keep this video short, I'm not going to get into the details. But prior to that incident, my friend had um, a teenage boy. He was just getting he was 12, getting to 13, and she wanted me to mentor him. Right, she wanted me to mentor him because she liked the fact that I had so many degrees. Right, I didn't come here with my parents or my family or sibling. I was alone here in America, and she admired the fact that I'd accomplished all these degrees. I'd worked successfully professionally, and she at the time she viewed me as a very rigid Christian, very strict. This was ages ago that she knew me, right? She knew me. It's been a while, and at that time she thought I was a very, rigid Christian. But of course, I've read a lot, and so it's made me very flexible. I'm very flexible, in terms because I have education not just in the humanities, in history, and in law, but also in the sciences. I did mathematics. I was a pre-med major. So I, so she wanted me to mentor her son, right? But since this happened, at some point I was actually under house arrest, right, based on these false charges. I've done videos explaining what happened. So I started doing videos. First started talking just about American presidents because that was something I did. I'd read all the biographies of all American presidents, so I thought that was a way to be able to get the kid to be interested in learning about American presidents. A quick way for him to be interested. It would just spark his curiosity, right? But of course, and I try and weave in some kind of other general knowledge information as well, just a desire to learn, right, to develop that passion, right, for learning and curiosity, right. Um, and now I mentioned that I have a major in mathematics. I did mathematics. I did accounting. I have majored in accounting. I have an MBA. I was a pre-med major, so I did organic chemistry, biology, all those things. Now, importantly, right? So if you study mathematics, if you study algebra, mathematics, if you study chemistry, those things can't help you to become a good citizen, right? They can't help you to develop morals, right? Those things are amoral, right? They're not subjects that have value judgment, right? They're just they don't teach you morals, right? But when I was growing up in Nigeria, I was introduced to Christianity because of my parents. Both my parents were Christians, right? And in the school I grew up in, schools I attended as a child, my elementary, my secondary, we did what was called moral instruction. That's basically studying one some form of religion. You choose a religion you want to study, and a teacher comes to teach you, right? If you choose Islam, because we have Nigeria is sort of split in between 50-50 Christians and Muslims. So if you choose that you want to study Christianity, then there's a teacher who comes to teach you, Christianity, moral instruction in Christianity, and studying the Bible. So I was very fortunate. I had this exposure since childhood, and apart from going to church as well. And the church I attended as a teenager, growing up in Nigeria, interestingly, it's still the same church I attend today. They have a strong emphasis on mastering the Bible, right? That's part of their method, right? They master the Bible, right? So they'll constantly read the Bible. You go through it peruse scripture. That's what they do, right? So so you learn morals from the Bibles. You learn ethics, right? Because it's one thing to be educated in mathematics, chemistry, biology. None of those things those things don't teach you morals, or they don't teach you scruples, right? They don't, right? You can be more analytical, right? You learn to be more analytical. You develop skills, but you're not ethical. You don't become a better citizen or a better person or responsible towards your people, right? You don't do any of those things. It's just like in biology. It has Darwinian logic. It teaches you that we're all animals, right? That we're all animals. Survival of the fittest. That's what it lays. At its premium. Survival of the fittest. Do whatever it is it takes for you to survive, right? So it doesn't teach you ethics or scruples. But when you study some kind of religion, right, it helps you, right? And in my case, obviously, I studied Christianity or the Bible because, yes, no doubt, I was born to a Christian home. My parents were Christians, and I grew up studying the Bible. I liked it. My best friend, by the way, since my childhood, was a Muslim, right? A Muslim, had a mosque in their house, and he's a devout Muslim, right? I'm a devout Christian. I don't advertise it again. So this is not to proselytize, right? But it's just another way to become a better citizen. It's if you so I'm what I'm going to do is draw some kind of morals, scruples, ethics out of this. So I'm going to get into it. I'm going to be showing since I've done a video on false flag operation, I decided to uh, show an example of a false flag operation in the Bible. There are many, but I'm going to use one that with respect to ethics, because in fact there were times that the children of Israel themselves in the Old Testament, they performed false flag operations against their enemies as a strategy as well. Went to spy and did things. So, but no, this time I'm just going to focus on ethics. So I'm going to be reading, talking about the story of Naboth, right? The vineyard of Naboth, and how the uh, king of Israel at the time, Ahab, who was a very vile king of Israel, and his wife Jezebel, they planned a false flag operation against Naboth, right? But I'm going to read through it. I'm just going to redirect it, and you can easily see what I mean by the false flag operation. I'm going to define a false flag operation again real quick. So a false flag operation, the name comes from the 16th century, right? And so it was when like a vessel or a ship or warship, or they would disguise themselves by hide their identity by flying a neutral flag or a flag of their enemy that they were planning to attack, so the enemy wouldn't recognize, so they could get close and be able to fire upon them, so they could attack them. So that's a false flag. So they were disguising, misrepresenting themselves, their true intention. So that was how that name came about, false flag operation. And it was apparently used initially by pirates. It was pirates who used to use this, right? So they'd hide their identity. They could fly a flag of a neutral party, neutral nation, or they could fly the flag of the enemy they want to attack, right? So they make it seem like, well, they're on the same side, right? And then when they get close, they start to fire, they start to attack. So just to hide their identity, to misrepresent things. That's a false flag operation. Now, in modern times, I did a video explaining what a false flag operation is. In modern times, it was used, in the 20th century, it was used, and those were the things, false flag operations were the things that instigated the Second World War. Japanese used it in Manchuria. They blew up their own railways in Manchuria and pretended that it was Chinese who blew it up in order to have pretext and justification to invade Manchuria, right? Claiming that it was China, it was the Chinese who attacked them. The same thing with the Germans. The Nazis did it in Poland, right? In Germany, they dressed some prisoners, right? That's the Nazis, the Gestapo and the SS. They dressed some prisoners, dressed them like they were Polish, had them attack their own station, a radio station in Germany, Gleiwitz, right? They had them attack them, and they killed those people, right? They killed these people because it was actually Germans who did all the attacking, right? And they killed some people, left their bodies dressed up in Polish uniforms, right? And to make it seem like, well, these Polish attacked them. And so they used it as a pretext to invade Poland the next day on September 1, 1939. That's a false flag operation. And I talked about how I was a victim of a false flag operation by Montgomery County Police, Jide Iware, Howard University professor. I've talked extensively about this, and rogue agents of the Department of the Navy and Department of Defense. I've talked extensively about this. Today, I'm going to just talk about the false flag operation in the Bible. So, as a frame of reference, I'm going to also quickly read from the book of Exodus. So importantly, there was false testimony, right? There was false testimony. So remember, just bear in mind, the ninth commandment says, do not bear false witness. So this was something evil that really happened. Do not bear false witness. That's a ninth commandment. I'm going to read from Exodus. I'm reading from Exodus, the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verse 7, right? And just because of the times we're in, I also read from verse 9. So bear with me. Now, this is in the old King James Version, right? The original King James Version, the language. So it's Shakespearean language. But so this is going to be real quick. So Exodus chapter 23, verse 7, verse 7. Keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. So you see, keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. And that's Exodus 23 and verse 7. Now, because during this era of ICE raid, everybody is a victim of ICE raids, and many people. America is supposed to be the land of opportunity, land of the persecuted, and it's what's going on is now contrary to the ideals of America. I'm an American citizen, right, today, but I came here as well as an immigrant, and America blessed me with tremendous opportunities. Of course, I don't want criminals, people who are, I don't want them to come to America, right? Not criminals, but there are many people who are not criminals, immigrants, who are being persecuted with these ICE raids, and they're not getting the opportunities that I got. I want other people to have opportunities that I got as well. America America gave me tremendous opportunities, right? And I'm an American citizen. So just to give those people hope today, I'm going to quickly read Exodus chapter 23, verse 9 as well, right? It says, also, thou shalt not oppress a stranger or foreigner, right? Foreigner, for ye know the heart of a stranger or foreigner, seeing ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. It's foreigner is also synonymous. So it's talking about the immigrants. So there's an instruction by God in the Bible, right, that Jewish people should not oppress foreigners, right? Immigrants, foreigners, don't oppress them. Let me read it again. Also, thou shalt not oppress a stranger, for ye know the heart of a stranger, seeing ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. And then let me just remind us again of the frame of reference that I'm going to be reading for, that I'm going to be using for my reading from the story of Naboth and his vineyard. Keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked. And that's Exodus chapter 23, verse 7. So there you go. Now I'm going to start reading from the book of First Kings chapter 20, and this time it's not. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to be reading from the old version. This is the new version of King James. So we're more modern English language, the new version of King James. So, okay. Yep. Now let me start. Okay. So it's actually First Kings. It's First Kings chapter 21. Right? First Kings chapter 21. Some time later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors." So Ahab went home. I don't want to do a lot of sidebars, so I can quickly read quickly, and then I will, get into an analysis. But so there's a reason Naboth. I'm just going to quickly explain. There's a reason why Naboth was refusing to give Ahab his vineyard or even sell it, because it was due to a Mosaic law, right? So it was consistent with the laws Moses had given them, right? So it was just he was following the law really as well, apart from honoring, his ancestors. He was following the law. So Ahab went home sullen and angry because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my ancestors." He lay on his bed sulking and refusing to eat. His wife Jezebel came in and asked him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" He answered her, "Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, 'Sell me your vineyard. If you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.'" Jezebel, his wife, said, "Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat, cheer up, I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters she wrote, "Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people, but seat two scoundrels opposite him and have them bring charges that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death." So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel directed. In the letters she had written to them, they proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Then two scoundrels came and sat opposite him and brought charges against Naboth before the people, saying, "Naboth has cursed both God and the king." So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent word to Jezebel, "Naboth has been stoned to death." As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab, "Get up and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite that he refused to sell to you. He is no longer alive, but dead." When Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he got up and went down to take possession of Naboth's vineyard. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, "Go down to meet Ahab, king of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in Naboth's vineyard, where he has gone to take possession of it. Say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. Have you not murdered a man and seized his property?' Then say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. In the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood. Yes, yours.'" Ahab said to Elijah, "So you have found me, my enemy." "I have found you," he answered, "because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord. He says, 'I am going to bring disaster on you. I will wipe out your descendants and cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will make your house like that of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and that of Baasha, son of Ahijah, because you have aroused my anger and have caused Israel to sin.' And also concerning Jezebel, the Lord says, 'Dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Dogs will eat those belonging to Ahab who die in the city, and the birds will feed on those who die in the country.' There was never anyone like Ahab who sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by Jezebel, his wife. He behaved in the vilest manner by going after idols like the Amorites, the Lord drove out before Israel. So that's I'm going to set that aside and just quickly explain what happened there. So um, hopefully you can easily ponder over, reflect over what I just read, and hopefully you can read it as well. That's First Kings chapter 21. That was a false flag operation, and we see the king of Israel, right? He was supposed to, uphold the law. Back then, the laws came from, they could dictate the law. Of course, the Israelites had the laws of Moses already, right? But kings could make their own rules. But Israel was sort of different, right? Because they had established laws. In other places, right, kings could just arbitrarily make laws and rules. But the children of Israel, they followed Mosaic law, the laws that God had given them. So you see, Ahab wanted to take the um, Ahab, who was king of Israel, wanted, Naboth's vineyard, which was contrary to the laws of Moses. And Ahab was keeping his integrity. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just following the law. It wasn't him being arrogant. But you see that there are people who abuse power, right? So this was a king and the king's wife, Jezebel. And you see how, it says at the end that Jezebel, his wife, pushed Ahab to do things that are bad. So I guess the people, it goes without saying, the people you marry, your partner, they're very critical, right? You don't want to be in bad company, people who, push you to do bad. You want to be with people who influence you to do good, right? Not people who will make you do vile things like Ahab, right? So this is an example of a false flag operation, right? So it just in order to get his property, right, to violate the law, they pretended, right? They masked what they were doing in righteousness, right? So she had these counts, they were scoundrels, two scoundrels, and even elders, nobles, right? So you see nobles, it's not today, right? Not it's since ancient times, right? In the Bible, there are nobles who did vile things, right? They did vile things, just like I've talked about in Montgomery County, Maryland, like a Judge James Bonifant, who's done a vile thing, Judge Bibi Berry, right? She acted on behalf of her friend Jide Wari to do a vile thing. Jide Wari, for instance, I talked about, he's an elder of a church, Fossey Bible Church. So they did a vile thing. So they framed me. They tell a lie, right? They do. So people who have prominent positions, they abuse their office, right, to frame an innocent man. But God sees everything, right? Just as God saw what was happening in the Old Testament in the Bible in the time of King Ahab, God sees, right, that I'm an innocent man that's been framed by a man who abused authority. He used the backing of his church in Montgomery County, Maryland, Fossey Bible Church. He used the backing of a judge who he knows, Judge Bibi Berry. He used the backing of a bad judge, Judge James Bonifant, right, to abuse me, to take away my rights, right. So, and you see that's what happened in the Old Testament, right, with Naboth, right? And so they framed Naboth, they hide it, they mask what they're really doing, right? They misrepresent their true intentions, like they're doing something righteous, right? They proclaim the fast, right? Like they're proclaiming the fast to God, and then they falsely accuse him. So they first deceive him, right? Like they're going to like they put him in a prominent position, like they're honoring him, they deceive him. So, like me, the false flag operation, the way they did it, they actually pretended on May 16, I actually have the email that they were taking me through this prestigious program, Navy General Officers Professions Program, right? Meanwhile, they were really framing me, right? So I've done videos talking about that. I'm not going to discuss that now, but I'm just going to show you an example of a false flag operation in the Bible. So they placed Naboth in a prominent position. They pretended they were going to honor him, but they were planning to humiliate him, not just humiliate him and bring him down, or accuse him falsely. They brought false charges against him, but they're planning on killing him on false charges. And the queen used scoundrels, true scoundrels, right? So in my case, they used a scoundrel, a guy called Germa He can't speak a word of English. He's a criminal alien, right? So they used a scoundrel to make a false charge. And he accused me falsely of doing what I never did. He filed a peace order. The police, like a disgusting, vile Sergeant Charles Drenwitz, vile police officers, and they, they make false charges. This guy, Shumi, filed a peace order, actually lying, saying, I kidnapped him, right? Somebody that I kidnapped him in my apartment, right? So he can't speak a word of English, but he wrote this screed on a peace order, and then they did an ex parte order. So, under the law, if they accuse you of something, you have a right, it's your Sixth Amendment, to face your accuser, to defend yourself. I was denied all of that. They did use two ex parte orders. So that was a false flag operation, false flag attack. So you see what they did to Naboth in the Old Testament. So these two scoundrels, after Naboth had been placed in a prominent position, they accused Naboth that he blasphemed against God and against the king, that, in order to stone him to death. So that's a false flag operation. But you see, eventually, God sees everything. So the prophet of God came, that's Elijah. Elijah is one of the most prominent prophets in the Old Testament, right? Elijah comes around, and the king Ahab says, hey, that his enemies found him out. Yes, God sees everything, and God revealed things to his prophet, right, who came and gave the judgment. That, well, dogs, Naboth was killed and humiliated, so much so that even dogs licked his blood. But they promised, the king, right? It doesn't matter his position. Dogs are going to lick his blood in the same place again. I've done another video in which I talk about the death of King Ahab. You can look at that. You can watch that video, or you can read it in the Bible. And the same thing with Jezebel. She died a very gruesome death. She was thrown down, and dogs ate her up. It was a very gruesome, terrible death. So having other religions, they call it karma, right? What goes around comes around. God rewards good deeds, and He punishes evil as well. My name is Olurotimi Usha, and I will keep you posted. Thank you.